Every morning I get letters from people who see me on stage or television. But this isn't my post, thank goodness. Otherwise I'd never get round to replying to them all. No, it's what's delivered to your office every morning at about 6:30. Do you know that you receive around 20,000 letters? And that's on a good day. On a bad day, it's sometimes as many as 90,000. The cheques inside can have a value of a mere £250 million. Double that if it's an exceptional day.
And don't forget, yours isn't the only accounts office. There are two, at Cumbernauld, north of Glasgow, and in Yorkshire, at Shipley. So the combined total of cheques is between 500 and 1,000 million pounds. I expect by now you'll have worked out what that is a year. If you haven't, I'll tell you. Between the two accounts officers is handled annually around 40,000 million pounds. But when numbers are that big, they can be misleading. Although each cheque is only a tiny proportion of the total, to the sender there's only one that really counts. Theirs.
And quite rightly, too. But one of the reasons I think so is because I'm one of those that sends you cheques. For you, paying tax isn't too complicated. You fill in a form, do your work, and your employer deducts what is due from your salary. However, it's not quite so straightforward for the likes of me, or for the self-employed or small businessman. Our payments make up about 1/3 of your daily post.
My salary comes from fees I get for each appearance made. This job was proving a tough nut to crack. But I hadn't figured how tough. Track down the missing dough, they said, and fast.
Forward to the people!
My salary can't be a fixed amount like yours, so it has to be assessed differently. My accountant keeps a check on all income and outgoings, and once a year he submits it to my local tax district. Here, someone calculates how much Schedule D tax I'll have to pay. It takes a while to sort it all out, but in the end there'll be a notification of assessment and a demand. You get a copy of all this at the accounts office, so that the data can be processed onto the main computer.
Paying a year's tax in a lump sum can be quite a shock. The law allows some Schedule D taxpayers to pay in 2 instalments, and that includes me. It reduces the shock a bit, but it's still not amongst the year's most pleasurable experiences, so I hope you won't be offended if I say that once I've sent my cheque, I prefer that to be the last I hear of it. And of your office.
And if I've done my bit correctly, that should be what happens. But it's when your work begins. Once you've sorted my payment out from all the other kinds of mail you've received, it'll be taken to the payments batching section. With so much mail about, single pieces of paper could easily get lost. So here, after you're sure I've not made any silly mistakes filling out my cheque and payslip, you group a whole load of payments together. 50 make up a typical batch. Any payments that have been made out wrongly, the irregulars, as you call them, will have to be looked at more closely later on before rejoining the system. Once batched, the payment's next destination is... You thought I was going to say PCK. Well, if that's the next destination, then this is halfway house, encoding. The main concern here is with the cheques. It's only one operation, keying in the amount each cheque is made out for, but it has 2 purposes. Firstly, it's like an oversized pocket calculator and gives a total for each batch. At the same time, it prints on each cheque its value. That's how the taxpayer wrote it. Beneath the signature is the encoded version. It's not just printed in any old ink, it's magnetic. You'll see why in a minute. Now, the cheques and payslips have been together ever since we taxpayers posted them to you. But this is the point that they go their separate ways. The payslips go now to PCK. It stands for Processor Controlled Keying, in case you didn't already know. And all the data on them is keyed onto the computer disks. If you've not got nimble fingers or you're trying to keep your nails long, you better close your eyes for a moment. A good operator hits 20,000 keys an hour. That's around 6 every second. At this speed, even a 1% error rate would mean 200 mistakes each hour. So these girls are expected to do rather better with only a 0.1% error rate. If the total for the batch is the same as the total for the cheques, the data is transferred to the mainframe computer. Here, my account, along with all the other accounts for the cheques in this batch, will be amended to record that payments been made. The cheques, in the meantime, have arrived at a machine which sorts them out into their banks. It also reads those figures we saw being printed in magnetic ink so that by mid-afternoon, it provides for each bank not just a list of every cheque that's passed through the accounts office during the day, but also a grand total of how much they're worth. In this case, I make it nearly £4 million being drawn from a single bank. In one day, remember? And that's it. Or it should be. But things aren't always that straightforward. Let's retrace our steps. Back to first thing in the morning, when the post was initially sorted. Not everybody's like me and sends just a cheque and a payslip. This one contains a letter.
Dear Sir, I know that I owe £150, but business is bad and £20 is all I can afford at present. I will try to pay it all when I can. In the meantime, I enclose £20. I hope this is all right. Yours sincerely, Robert Sharp.
And there's a cheque for £20, as he said, but no payslip.
In this case, the local collection office let him pay the missing £130 in instalments. So, how come this turned up 2 weeks later?
Dear Sir, I'm sorry that you were not satisfied with my £20 and that you've sent me a further demand. I had hoped that when I heard from you that I wouldn't have to pay any more until things picked up. Please tell me what I'm to do now. Yours sincerely, Robert Sharp.
Well, it oughtn't to have been what should he do, but what should have happened at the accounts office to stop the second demand from going out while the local collection was dealing with it.
The correct procedure which should have been followed was to look up Mr. Sharp's reference number on the microfiche index. Once that was found, a special form, the pro forma payslip, should have been prepared to pay in the £20. Amongst the details on the form, there is one that is particularly important. It's the last one in the signal section, the W, which stops the computer from sending out demands for 7 days.
There's a fair bit more work needed to sort it out completely. But at least following the correct procedure would have given the taxpayer a little less to worry about. Not all letters are as polite as that one. This comes from a self-employed shopkeeper.
This morning, I received your notice threatening to take me to court for £2,000. I've written to you twice before telling you that my tax inspector had told me I need only pay £1,300. I paid this 3 months ago, and the cheque has been cashed. Doesn't the right hand know what the left is doing? It's this kind of bureaucratic incompetence that has led Britain to the state she's in today. I'm going to write to the Prime Minister about your inefficiency. You haven't even had the courtesy to acknowledge receipt of my earlier letters. Yours sincerely, J.B. Bartlett.
And sure enough, he did write to Downing Street repeating the whole story and ending
We small businessmen have enough difficulties to contend with without having to waste time and money on fruitless letters to Inland Revenue. Yours sincerely, J.B. Bartlett.
Someone, somewhere, should have got a rocket over that one. The problem had been caused by lots of little errors, not least the failure to send an acknowledgement. And although it was already being solved by the time the letter was being sent to the Prime Minister, you can understand Mr. Bartlett's indignation. But indignation isn't the worst that can happen. Like the case of an old-age pensioner, William Fraser, who was due to pay £400. He sent in a cheque, but no payslip. At the accounts office, the microfiche reader was used to find his reference number. But there's more than one Fraser. To cut a long story short, the payment went through, not to his record, but one of these others. In the meantime, the computer issued further demands to our Mr. Fraser. See, the trouble was he was ill and just put them to one side to be dealt with the next time his son came to visit. Yeah, I expect you've guessed the outcome. The case was referred to the local collector.
Basically, if I can't find a phone number for them, we always normally send out a letter straight away. That's a reminder. Failing that, I can't make a phone call. I'm not getting any response with letters. So the only other thing to do is make a call. There's no other way I'll get in contact with that person.
Some people can be very abrupt with you, not very nice, you know. They don't really give you a chance once they find out that you're from the Inland Revenue. They just snap your head off. Because I think because you're female, you tend to get away with a bit more. Because they tend to be a bit more lenient towards you than they would with a man. Don't think they feel so threatened by you.
Well, the one that comes to mind, you know, it was regarding a subcontractor. I think he was owing a lot of money. I spoke to the wife, you know, and she was doing her washing up. And she said, you know, that he wasn't in and all that, and that she didn't know anything about it, you know, that I had to come in the evening, like. So I told her, you know, that I might not be able to come in the evening because since I know the taxpayer is living here, you know, I don't need to come back in the evening. If he isn't going to pay, take him to court. As I was walking to the car, you know, there was a shout, you know, "Oh, you come back." You know, he actually ran after me, you know, because I, you know, actually couldn't make out who it was. He was in his pajamas and apparently was a taxpayer. He said to me, you know, "How dare you threaten my wife, you know, I'll knock your block off," and all that. You know, he says, "Don't ever come back here again or I'll break your legs."
The accounts office, basically, they will issue all the local action notices to us. They will also issue us with information as to whether or not the taxpayer has paid or whether or not, in fact, the inspector has made an adjustment, an amendment that comes down over the telephone at night. And that will tell us whether or not the taxpayer has paid, whether or not there's been an adjustment to the amount. So it's quite important that we get that information before we make a call.
And as the local action notice is all the information the collector has on each case when he makes a visit, it's vital that it's correct.
Sometimes we go out and the taxpayer is paid and I'm standing there with a local action notice. He has received the assessment, he's replied, he's sent his payment off to the computer. It's been processed, he's received a receipt, and yet back at the local collection, sometimes we haven't been told that it's been paid.
In the case of William Fraser, they hadn't been told. Someone at the accounts office knew he'd paid, but for the moment, that wasn't going to do any good at all.
Mr. Fraser?
Yes?
I've called to do with income tax.
Good morning, Corporation Tax. Can I help you? I see. Do you have a reference number? Yes, please. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Can I have the name of the company and the address, please? Yes.
Now, so far, I've only mentioned Schedule
can
D
you tell
tax.
me how
That
much the
applies to
payment
those
is
of
for,
us who are
please?
self-employed and freelance. Your office also handles corporation tax. Companies pay that, and if they're big, their cheques are big.
Otherwise, assessment and collection procedures are much the same as you've already seen. But they still need to be handled with efficiency and with speed. Rather different is the third method, pay as you earn. It's how you and most people pay, with tax being deducted from your wages. Booklets of PAYE payslips are made up in your output section before being sent to employers. The individual payslips will next appear at the accounts office when they've been filled out and returned each month. The employers also enclose a cheque for the amount of tax and insurance they've deducted from their employees' wages, though not always.
Dear Sir, I have written to several branches of the Inland Revenue concerning my company's registration for PAYE. None of our employees or directors are required to pay PAYE, and you will, therefore, never receive a remittance from us. I do not know why the attached reminder was issued, but please advise me what action I should take in order to avoid further correspondence, tables, booklets or forms from you on this subject. Yours faithfully, R.S.
Dear Sir, heading Income Tax Pays You Earn NIC. Thank you for your letter of the 4th of October. Stop.
Not every mistake that's made results in correspondence. More often, it's lost time. To see what could happen to an incorrect payment, we set up our cameras in batching and waited. To give us a better chance of seeing one slip through, we not only made this officer feel very nervous, we also included 5 false payments among her post. The ones to look for are a payslip which has a cheque character missing. This one, where the S could be mistaken for a 5, an amendment which has been made, but the total is now wrong, and a payslip without an account or sub-number. Finally, we put in a wrongly completed cheque. If you read it twice, you'll see the words don't tally with the figures. But will she? The first one of ours to turn up was the missing cheque character. No problem here, spotted, marked and sent to irregulars. Very soon after came the payslip with the incorrect total. Again, no problem. She didn't mark the S that looks like a 5, but only because we'd put a false date on the cheque and she rejected it for that instead. In fact, she was doing so well that we thought we'd never see what we were waiting for. Until the missing account number payslip, which for some reason she let through. So now we followed the batch through encoding along to PCK. That bleeping sound means that it's been rejected by the computer. So now it must be sent to reconciliation, whose job it is to search and find exactly what the error is. But this payment is just a part of the batch. Its failure holds up the processing of all the others. But does it really matter that time has been wasted chasing a small error? This time one we induced by filming, but one that's similar to many that slip through every day. Well, the reason the whole of the accounts office system demands speed can be seen every afternoon at around 5 o'clock. This van is carrying £250 million worth of cheques that have been handled by the Cumbernauld office during the day. And the same thing will be happening at Shipley too. It's not a security guard job though, because As it's all in cheques, they're just worthless bits of paper. But they're not worthless to Inland Revenue. As soon as they reach the Bank of England, they'll start to gain interest. That's why you're asked to work fast and to be adaptable. To lose even a single day's interest on this lot would cost Britain over £85,000. That's enough to keep 125 patients in hospital from first illness through to recovery. And there's another reason for speed. At about the time these cheques are delivered, you're starting work on the next day's load, just as big, just as important. I can't say I like paying tax. I don't suppose you enjoy looking at the deductions section on your payslip either. But we'd all be stuck without it. Roads, hospitals, schools, you name an essential service, tax pays for it. And that's why the accounts officers were set up, to make the most of the money that's paid by speeding up the stages between receiving a payment and banking it.
And it's also an important point of contact with the likes of me, the customer, if you like, albeit a reluctant one. So any contact should be seen to be as efficient and as painless as possible. Believe me, we're really grateful for not hearing from you when things go smoothly. And we're just as pleased when you solve our problems too.
Dear sir, may I thank you for all the time you've spent in helping me. It really was a worry to me, and I'm most thankful that you've been able to sort it all out. Yours faithfully.